Hi witches, today we are talking fairy books. I've chosen 3 books plus 1 bonus to show you. I say chosen, I feel like actually they've chosen me and they've made their way into my life rather than me picking them, but yeah, in the spirit of fairy. But anyway, we're going to go through the main points of these books. I'm going to tell you what I like about them, how they're set out, and how they are each very different from each other. So if you're interested in witchcraft and fairy practices and fairy magic, then this is the video for you. So get comfy and we'll jump right in. So welcome back everybody, thank you for being here, thank you for watching. I'm Wren, I'm the Cemetery Witch, and to fit in with our fairy theme on Patreon, we're having Fairy Month, I am basically going to tell you about 4 fairy books, so we've got 3 and a bonus, and I'm going to go through them and we're going to just explore, you know, how different they all are. We've already had our Hexerai video on Patreon, our exclusive video all about fairy, and we have learned what a big topic it is and how fairies are classified differently across the world, how there are different types of fairy, how there is no set standard really to fairy magic or tradition, and then when you blend the belief of fairy with witchcraft to get Faericraft, you are going to have again very different things, because depending on the beliefs and the practices of that particular magical practitioner. So it is such a huge topic. They are such a hard thing to define. Even just the spelling of fairy, people use differently. So in this book, it's spelled F-A-I-R-Y. Then we've got F-A-E-R-I-E, and then we've got F-A-E-R-Y. So there is just so much here to talk about. Most agree that fairies are nature spirits or the essence of nature or elemental spirits of some kind. Alison Geddes Ward in this book describes fairies as elemental angels. Most agree that the fairy realm mirrors our realm, and the point of that is there is a lot for us to learn as humans about ourselves and about the planet, whether that be good or bad. There is also the belief that we can interact with them, but where people tend to disagree and debate is whether we should interact with them. For all the books that you can find on Faericraft and working with the fairies and the people that, you know, push that narrative, you will find just as many people and probably references in books saying that you shouldn't. So very, very, not a controversial topic, but one that is definitely up for debate. People have vastly different opinions on this topic. So because of that, when you consider all of these things, fairy books are very, very different. You can have 10 fairy books and they will just be completely different reads. So I'm going to show you 4 today, and we are going to go into the main points of them, what I like about them, how they're set out, and basically what you can learn from them. So we've got 3 main books. We've got one which is about fairy stories. We've got one which is about the creative melding, to quote Alison Geddes Ward, of fairy belief and natural witchcraft to create Faericraft, and then we have one that's actually about fairy magic, and then we'll go into the 4th book. There is an exclusive video on Patreon over in our Hexerai series. Each month we have a video lesson or topic, so you can learn from the comfort of your own home. It's up to you, you don't have to interact with the community on there, but they are fantastic. And so we cover fairy this month. We have recipes, we have spells, we have remedies, we have community altars. There is so much going on over there throughout the course of a month. So if you'd like to join me and my top supporters, come over, have a look. There's 3 different tiers offering different packages. The top package basically gives you everything, and you will get to see videos like this one earlier than it going out onto YouTube. So there are so many benefits. So let's start with meeting the other crowd. This is the Fairy Stories of Hidden Island. So this is the recounting of actual stories that people have told the author, Eddie Lenihan. And if you take a look at him, he is considered a national treasure of Ireland. if you take a look at him, he seems somewhat otherworldly himself. His mannerisms, his great big hair and beard. We are a huge Eddie Lenihan fan in this house, as I have explained before. And he is a Shanachie, he is a lore keeper and tale spinner, so he collects stories. So he collected his first ever fairy story and he was hooked ever since. So in the intro in this book is very, very interesting. He says there's not as many fairy story books as you might think. Books that collect real stories. Quite often fairy stories are disorganised within a book, if there is a book on fairy stories, and they're mainly aimed at children. And as a result of that, they tend to have silly illustrations that might be kind of grotesque or over the top or just not very sensible. But actually there are serious accounts of fairy encounters, and that is what he is collecting, and that's what he's put in his work. Many of these stories are very dark. They feature taboos such as abduction and enchantments and danger and injuries. And he basically is relaying those stories to us in the style of the person that has told them to him. So he tries to keep the original words, the syntax, the style, just the way that people talk, so that you can really immerse yourself in the story. And just from the introduction alone, you can learn whether Eddie actually believes in fairies, how he extracts the stories from the people that are a bit shy or are not willing to tell their story, a great lesson for us all in life. And he also gives an interesting list of supposed facts about the good folk. So if this sounds like something you would be interested in, then I absolutely recommend this book. It's laid out in 3 parts. So part 1 covers fairy, like who they are and what they want. Part 2 is all about fairy places and signs of fairies. So there is an abundance of fairy mounds over in Ireland. And so there are lots of fairy happenings and encounters. So he talks about these kinds of things in part 2. And part 3 covers gifts, punishments and other outcomes related to fairy encounters. I've counted 72 stories in all, and he has got them all from oral sources. So this is stories that people have told him. He's got a really interesting podcast on YouTube. It's called Tell Me a Story. All you've got, I'll put the link down below, but all you've got to do is type in Eddie Lenihan and you'll get his podcast up. There's lots of other little videos and things with him in them as well on there. And yeah, he's just a great storyteller. The stories in here, some of them are long, some of them are short, and basically anything by Eddie Lenihan, any of his endeavours come highly recommended from me and my husband. We're a great Eddie Lenihan fan. And I got this book for Christmas. So that one found its way into my life. The next one is Faericraft by Alison and Neil Geddersward. And I have a bit of a personal story about this particular book, this very copy. I had Neil around my house for dinner one day and he spotted this. And I was a bit embarrassed because I hadn't yet bought a copy of this. It had been out for years, but I hadn't yet bought a copy, was intending to, but saw this one randomly in a charity shop for £6, to give you some idea of how long ago that was. And he spotted it and I was like, I'm ever so sorry, Neil, I actually got that in a charity shop, but I will buy a brand new copy so that you get the proceeds from it. And he was like, no, don't be silly. Do you want me to sign it? And I said, well, you can sign it and that would be lovely, but don't you think it's a bit weird because, you know, we're friends and like I don't really get starstruck by people, you know. Human beings are amazing and they do amazingly creative things. And whilst Neil, I'm so proud of him and I'm in awe of his creativity, he's kind of like my buddy and it just felt a bit weird asking like for his autograph, you know. So I said, well, you can do if you want. So he's signed it and it says, with love and blessings, Neil Geddersward, P.S. my mate. And that was back in January 2012. So this was originally published in 2005, so nearly 20 years ago. And I really love, there's something in the beginning of this book, which is why I've got a marker. And I really love this. It says, just follow the first and only rule of Faericraft and you will get along just fine. Rule 1, normal rules do not apply. So this is a really, really lovely book. There's 11 chapters and it goes into who the fairies are, finding your way to fairyland, how to begin working with fairies, fairy lore, cautions, and there's poems and quotes at the beginning of every single chapter. I'm just trying to find you to show you the beautiful illustrations. There's their own classification of fairies. There's lots of instructional bits and bobs, so like how to use this book, how to work with the fairy king. There's fairy lore in here, so like for example there's a bit on King Oberon. Amazing illustrations by Neil. As far as I'm aware, Alison's written the book and Neil has illustrated it. They're not actually together anymore. This is something that they created when they were husband and wife. Neil's now married to someone else. And this is a really lovely, juicy book. In a roundabout way, you'll learn just as much about witchcraft from this book as you will fairy. So if you were to read this, not really knowing anything about witchcraft, you would learn something, because there's stuff like, you know, how to call a fairy circle, which is not that different to, you know, a regular magic circle. Remember that this book is kind of indicative of their beliefs and their practice, some of their feelings and how they go about stuff. I know Alison is considered a fairy priestess, but that might not be how other people do it, and vice versa. So I really, really enjoyed that book. It comes highly recommended by me. The next book is Fairy Magic by Serona Knight, and this is spells, potions and lore from the earth spirits. She has described fairies as earth spirits, as elementals. It covers the fairy history and mythology and folklore, which is really, really nice, but this is more concerned with practical work, really. So it's got loads and loads of magical correspondences in relation to the Fae. So there's information about offerings, crystals, plants, herbs, animals, trees. There's guidelines for fairy positive relationships. There's information on tools. There's spells and rituals and practical help. So how to call a circle in relation to working with fairy, calling in fairy guardians. There was one sort of ritual I noticed using a rune, algiz. So there has this sort of intersection and this crossover with Norse magic. And this is the thing with the fairy path. It does seem to just be a very personal path where people use their own influences and those of other paths. So there's not just fairy stuff in here, but witchcraft stuff as well, because obviously it's about magic and it's very information heavy. So it's a lot smaller than Faericraft, but there's just as much information in there. And it's another book that I really, really enjoyed. And the bibliography that they've mentioned to help them write this book, there's some cracking books in that bibliography. So really, really enjoyed this one. So 3 absolutely brilliant books on fairy, and they're all so, so different. The last book I'm going to show you is The Tree of Enchantment, Ancient Wisdom and Magic Practices of the Fairy Tradition by Orion Foxwood. I've still got the label on there. This book is really, really involved. I've actually done a written review on Patreon for this one. You really must concentrate on this book. And this book didn't feel fairy in its sort of energy. It is. I think you have to get the book before. I think that this book makes more sense, possibly, when you read the one that comes before, but it was a difficult book to get into, I found. So if you want to find the review on that one, then go over to Patreon. In conclusion then, really, fairy books are so varied. That is the main message that I have. They will help you build your own fairy practice, so that's why it's helpful, I think, to get more than one. And this obviously has to happen after you have decided how you feel about fairy. We shared over on Patreon some of our beliefs in fairy and how we felt about them, and the answers were quite different. So for some people, they are simple earth energies that we can work with, that we should work with, that are there to call upon, and with them we can create great things. And like I said before, other people will say stay away, don't touch them, don't get involved, and they're not as simple as you make out. I think that for some, the images in Faeriecraft, whilst they're really, really beautiful, and they've obviously been created by my friend, I think for some they will be a bit much, this idea of this like winged creature. Some may prefer a simple idea of spirits, but that's where these books are so helpful, because when you explore a topic and you explore it widely, you can really, really get to the crux of what it is that you believe in and how you feel. You know, if something doesn't resonate with you, but there is some element of that you've seen repeated elsewhere and it does resonate, that tends to underline something for you. So I would say read. If this topic interests you, read as many books on fairy as you can. Listen to fairy stories. Listen to Eddie Lenihan talk. Read his books. And also there is another podcast which is really good, and that is the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. And they also have a page on Facebook. At least they did many years ago. Don't know if it's still there. I think it is. But yeah. Immerse yourself in the topic, and I'm sure you will find a way through with your own opinions and feelings about it. I would love to know in the comments what you think. Do you believe in fairies? What are they? Have you had any personal experiences? Any experiences that you would care to share? Have you got any books? Any of the ones that I've shown, and have you got any that I haven't shown here that you could recommend? I would love to hear, and I'm sure the other people watching would love to hear as well. So thank you so much for watching. If you got this far, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to the channel. And if you hit the notification icon, you'll never miss another video. I'm back, I'm making videos again, and yeah, it's been lovely to spend this time with you. So thank you for watching, take care, love and blessings.